Well, hello there and welcome to Planet America's Fireside Chat. I'm John Barron.
And I'm Chaz Licciardello.
Coming up, the Democratic Convention has wrapped up in Chicago. We'll look at the highlights and some of the lowlights as well.
We're going to take you to Chicago to talk to a longtime ally of Kamala Harris, former California Governor Gray Davis.
That is coming up. But first, there have been many memorable moments and speeches throughout the last 4 days and nights. But I reckon, Chaz, this sums up the spirit of the DNC this week. It was the roll call to formally nominate Kamala Harris on night 2. Usually this is a long, formal, boring process, tallying up each state delegation, confirming the nomination. And because that was all done virtually a couple of weeks ago, there was really no point in doing it at all. So they they mix things up a little bit. Take Georgia, for example.
Georgia, how do you cast your vote?
Yeah! Ladies and gentlemen, we are here tonight to officially nominate Kamala Harris for president. Fire, get loud, another round of shots. DNC, turn out for what?
A lot more energy than the Republican equivalent.
Exactly. They're clearly pandering to the 78-year-old male white voters in the upper Midwest with Lil Jon. We will go through some of the other highlights of this week's DNC a little later on. But first, let's go right to the main event today, the acceptance speech of Vice President Kamala Harris. A very high-stakes moment that could potentially make or break her entire campaign. This is the moment where she accepted the nomination.
On behalf of the people, on behalf of every American, regardless of party, race, gender, or the language your grandmother speaks, on behalf of my mother and everyone who has ever set out on their own unlikely journey, on behalf of Americans like the people I grew up with, people who work hard, chase their dreams, and look out for one another. On behalf of everyone whose story could only be written in the greatest nation on earth, I accept your nomination to be President of the United States of America.
An important moment. You know what they're going to say, but she had to meet that moment. She had to fill that stage. She had to look as though she wanted to be there, which she did, and she had to look as though she deserved the right, she'd earned the right to be there, which I felt she did as well. I think it's mission accomplished for her.
Yeah, I felt like she definitely exhibited the requisite gravitas in her speech. Like, she's no Obama, like Barack or Michelle, but in terms of like, wow you with her speech. But I thought she really did the job. Like, she did what she needed to do. And I actually think that the real standout for me from this convention, which led to her speech, was just how well organized everything was. And what I'm referring to is not the fact that Joe Biden spoke at like 2 a.m.
Yeah.
What I'm talking
that
about.
and the shuttle buses to the hotels were a disaster, as were the queues outside. But the coherence of the message.
Yeah. I feel like I can list off the major themes of the convention right now.
Freedom?
Freedom, definitely.
Number one.
Patriotism.
Yeah.
Project 2025 is very scary.
Yes.
It's a candidate of the middle class / for the people. That's what Kamala Harris is. And then there's 2 more, which I'll have clips to illustrate. But all the things I just said and the ones I haven't mentioned yet, all of them came together in Kamala Harris's speech. And they were basically her entire speech, except for the bits where she then talked about why she should be commander-in-chief, which is particular to her. But basically, the entire 4 days built towards that final speech. It was all tied together. It was almost like the same person wrote every single speech. It was so well coordinated, and I thought that was very impressive. And at these conventions, people don't remember much about them.
No.
But to the extent that anyone's going to remember anything, it will be on message.
Yes.
Because that's how they built it.
The consistency of the portrait that was first sketched out on day one when they were still paying tribute to Joe Biden, but signalling the fact that the torch was passing between the generations and between the president, the vice president, and the way that in those subsequent speeches that portrait of Kamala Harris was coloured in a little bit more and a little bit more and a little bit more. So there was really almost nothing new. We'd heard a lot of the anecdotes about Kamala Harris's childhood. We'd heard them from others earlier in the week, but the way that she then told them herself to provide really a sense of a living, breathing portrait by the end of the convention, it all paid off to say, this is who I am. Here are the lessons I learnt principally from my mother and my childhood, the community I grew up in California in the late civil rights era through the 1970s. Here's why I became a lawyer. Not because I was chasing the big bucks, but because a friend of mine at school was being abused by her stepfather. I could see something was wrong. My mother said she has to come and live with us. That's why she went into the law to defend the children who were being abused by other people. Whether this is, a simplification or a distortion of her narrative, it was a very cogent narrative that I think is the kind of thing that voters want to have when they're saying, ultimately, is this person ready to be my president for 4 years? Do I know who this person is? What are their values? Well, she set that out in very clear terms this week.
I think you're right that each speaker was building on the one before, so that there was constant reinforcement of these messages, but every single person was adding just a little bit more. So it was never boring or repetitive, but just the message and the anecdotes and the themes I was trying to get out there just kept on being reinforced. Let me give you an example. Now, a bit of a spoiler, we're going to talk more about this later, but for me, there was just no doubt the Obamas were the highlights of the convention. Like, they're just incredible speakers. But Michelle Obama, when she came out, I felt that she set up Kamala Harris's speech in a number of ways. But one of them was with one of the themes I haven't mentioned yet, which was the theme of do something. Kamala Harris does something. She was a prosecutor. This is what she did. Rather than just sitting around talking, she did things. Trump, by contrast, only does things for himself, not for other people. He's a whiner. That was a message that was just reinforced over and over again. She does something, he doesn't. And Michelle Obama and Barack Obama's speech, I thought, set that up beautifully well. This is how Michelle Obama set it up.
She understands that most of us will never be afforded the grace of failing forward. We will never benefit from the affirmative action of generational wealth. If we bankrupt a business or choke in a crisis, we don't get a second, third, or fourth chance. If things don't go our way, we don't have the luxury of whining or cheating others to get further ahead. No. We don't get to change the rules so we always win. If we see a mountain in front of us, we don't expect there to be an escalator waiting to take us to the top. No. We put our heads down. We get to work. In America, we do something.
Okay, so not only was that probably the most effective critique of Donald Trump I've ever heard, in terms of she really summed up the issue, but not with abuse and not in a cheap way, in an intelligent way, but she set up that whole concept of that theme, which then, today, Kamala Harris paid off on.
And she taught Maya and me a lesson that Michelle mentioned the other night. She taught us to never complain about injustice, but do something about it. Do something about it. That was my mother. And she taught us, and she also taught us, and never do anything half-assed. And that is a direct quote.
And so that then just evokes everything else that Michelle Obama said and just reminds you of it. And I think that was really effective.
Yeah, and we talked a bit on Planet America this week, and we made light of the fact that there was a lot of talk of passing the torch from Biden to Harris, from Obama and the Clintons, Hillary Clinton to Harris. There was also another torch being passed through arguably the two women who have been the most admired black women in America for the last 20 years, Oprah Winfrey and Michelle Obama, essentially saying, because for years people have been saying Oprah should run for president, Michelle Obama should run for president. They were effectively saying this week, no, it's going to be Kamala. She is running for president and we're passing the torch to her as well. That's where those sorts of endorsements, those apolitical endorsements, not just the governor or senator, how good a surrogate can you be kind of endorsements, but the ones that simply say, what you as voters see in me, I see in her. And even though Kamala Harris is still not as well known as Oprah Winfrey or Michelle Obama, they kind of sprinkled a little bit of that magic powder over her this week, I think.
Definitely. And the best thing they did in the entire week was they kept Oprah Winfrey a secret.
Right.
Even an hour before the prime time, when they sent out the programs to all the news, they didn't mention Oprah Winfrey.
Yep.
She was a massive surprise.
And important
you
to
could
remember,
feel it electric across the crowd.
And of course, Chicago was where Oprah did her talk show for decades. She doesn't live there anymore. And it's important to remember as well, we now associate Oprah Winfrey with the Obamas, but when Oprah Winfrey endorsed Barack Obama in early 2008, when Obama was still probably running behind Hillary Clinton in that campaign for the Democratic nomination that year, Oprah Winfrey had been an apolitical figure. She identified herself as an independent, still as a registered independent voter, and she was speaking to independents, not just to Democrats. So it is important to say that she is not to be just assumed as being a kind of an Obama or any other Democrat she will endorse. This was quite a big deal that she endorsed Kamala Harris as well.
Part of her speech was speaking directly to independents. Yep. As an independent, this is what I think. There's no doubt about that. There's one more theme before we move on.
Yes.
Which I think just goes to what I've just been saying. Everything fit together. You've already mentioned the theme, probably unintentionally, which is that the last theme was turning the page / we're not going back. From the very beginning of her campaign, that's been the chant. We're not going back, over and over again. And that moved into, in this convention, talking about turning the page. And when they were saying that, that's really important because the knock on her that Trump is going to try and use, he's already tried, he's going to keep on trying, is she's not a change candidate. She's the vice president. How is she a change candidate? She's in the current administration.
Yeah.
And the answer to that from Kamala Harris in this convention is, yeah, I'm the vice president, but I'm a new generation. I'm not you people who have been around forever. I can say even...
Okay, boomer, you've had your time.
Yeah, and so that is an important message for her to get across. And it came through loud and clear at this convention. So throughout the convention, people were chanting, we're not going back, we're not going back. And then, once again, in her speech today, she paid it off.
Our nation with this election has a precious, fleeting opportunity to move past the bitterness, cynicism, and divisive battles of the past, a chance to chart a new way forward.
And finally, like I said, there's about 20 minutes of the speech dedicated to auditioning for why she should be commander-in-chief, why she should be taken seriously, why she was talking about being tough on crime, tough on borders, tough on foreign adversaries. Whether people buy it or not, she was selling hard for about 20 minutes.
Yeah, absolutely. And that is a crucial final piece to the puzzle for many voters. I like this person, I know this person, I understand their values. She can stand up there and deliver a strong speech, that's great. All these other people that we've known for decades, they say nice things about her. But can I see her standing behind the presidential seal, behind the resolute desk in the Oval Office? Do I see her as the person who has control over the nuclear football? So this is hugely important. She did dedicate a chunk of her speech to it, but this is also after she'd essentially been endorsed by the likes of former CIA Director and Defence Secretary Leon Panetta. Adam Kinzinger, the Republican congressman who is a veteran himself, a kind of a foreign policy hawk who's turned his back on the Republican Party, at least in the Trump era. He also endorsed Kamala Harris as a foreign policy leader, as did Mark Kelly, a former, now Arizona Senator. He was on the vice presidential shortlist, former combat pilot in Operation Desert Storm, and an astronaut as well. All of those guys got up there beforehand to say, we would follow, basically the inference was, we would follow orders from her. She is our Commander-in-Chief and much more fit to that role than we believe Donald Trump is. And so when Harris finally had her shot at describing how she would approach foreign affairs as a tough leader, she then contrasted that to how she believes Donald Trump interacts, and the fact that Donald Trump, for all his bluster and bravado, is not a strong leader. In fact, he's a dangerous leader. Take a look.
To take whatever action is necessary to defend our forces and our interests against Iran and Iran-backed terrorists. I will not cozy up to tyrants and dictators like Kim Jong-un who are rooting for Trump.
Yeah, a very effective moment. I think all in all, that speech probably hit exactly the right tone. And it's harder when you are a historic first woman of colour, second woman ever to be a nominee of a major political party, to figure out, well, you haven't got JFK's speeches in the back of your head. You haven't got Obama, or maybe you do. Everyone's got a little bit of Obama in their head these days. But for her to pitch the right tone, warmth when it was needed, humanity, empathy when it was needed, but then, crucially, to project strength, to say we're firmly behind Israel, but also that what is happening on a humanitarian level in Gaza is unacceptable and has to stop. She does seem to be shifting more towards the Palestinian side while still demanding a ceasefire and the release of the Israeli hostages. But that has not been without controversy as well, because she hasn't gone nearly as far as a lot of the pro-Palestinian Democrats, those uncommitted delegates who've been protesting this week. She hasn't gone nearly as far as they would like, which is to basically have an arms embargo on Israel until they stop potentially using American weapons to kill children in Gaza.
She's making no commitments. She's just describing things differently to how Joe Biden did.
Yeah, but I guess, well, it does seem as though some of the leaders of that uncommitted movement are encouraged somewhat, but maybe they're just hearing what they want to hear right now. But look, we've got a very special guest joining us from Chicago, the former governor of Kamala Harris's home state of California, Gray Davis. Governor, welcome to Planet America's Fireside Chat.
Thank you. I'm delighted to be with you.
I know, Governor, you've been to your fair share of conventions over the years. How does Chicago 2024 compare?
Believe it or not, Chicago was by far the best. It was harmonious, it was upbeat, at times it was joyous. The Vice President gave a magnificent speech, and we're all committed to making her the 47th President of the United States.
Governor, conventions are largely about getting the base motivated, getting them ready to volunteer, getting them to knock on doors. You're at the convention. Are the base motivated?
You know, I think her campaign is maybe a month old. It's very unusual when the incumbent president wins the primary and then 3 months before the election pulls out and endorses the vice president. So she's had to hit the ground running. But all the metrics are up. Volunteerism is through the roof. Registration is through the roof. Fundraising set an all-time record for any time in American political history. And she is the whole package. She believes in working with her allies in the Pacific, Australia, Japan, South Korea, and others. NATO, which she and President Biden helped revitalize, to help guide the world and help solve problems around the world. And she very much is a prosecutor. She spent 23 years as either a district attorney or an attorney general. So you don't want to mess with her if you're going to abuse children or, you know, try and give them fentanyl or create any kind of violent crime. By the same token, she's very empathetic, very inclusive, and wants an economy that gives opportunity to everybody. So I think she's the whole package. I think Trump will have no idea how to deal with her because she can be tough as nails. She made very clear, if you mess with America, it's a big mistake. She believes in the military, fully equipped with the most modern equipment, and she believes in the strength of the American people. So I think she's everything you would want, and most importantly, she's not Trump. I think people are just tired of the Trump act. All he does is complain about he was victimized here, victimized there. The man was born with a silver spoon in his mouth. He had every opportunity, like 4 to 6 bankruptcies, and every time his mouth is moving, he's telling you to lie.
Governor,
aside from that, he's a great person.
Governor, conventions such as this are a fascinating insight. We see former presidents, in some cases future presidents, and a lot of wannabe presidents who are never going to quite make it as well. You've known Kamala Harris for decades. You've supported her in all of her campaigns. At what point did you start to see her as a potential future president?
She asked me to come meet with her at a rally she was having in 2010 when she was running for Attorney General. And I went out and met with her. I was very impressed. She was at a rally. We spent a lot of time afterwards. I ended up having a fundraiser when she ran for Attorney General in our home, another fundraiser when she ran for U.S. Senate in our home, and another one when she ran for president. She's just a fantastic human being, and she has a very extended family, which she loves to cook for on Sunday nights. It's her, takes great pride and joy in doing that. And she's just great to her husband loves to play golf. He and I belong to the same club, so occasionally I see her in our parking lot, and I say, Kamla, what are you doing? She says, I'm reviewing my briefing book here, but I gave my husband 20 minutes, that's all, 20 minutes to go out and hit golf balls. Then he's coming back. So she's the whole package. I can't say enough good things about her.
But while we're talking about spotting talent early, Governor, have you seen anyone over the last 4 days who you've thought to yourself, oh, we need to keep an eye on them for 8 years' time or 12 years' time?
There are plenty of statewide office holders in California, and many of them are here tonight, and many of them are going to run for governor. But as I think this election showed us, you can't run for president. It's hard enough to run for governor, but you can't run for president unless the fates want you to win. I mean, what are the odds a sitting vice president finds out that she is going to be the nominee of the party 100 days before the election? I mean, my God, people start running 2 years in advance. So that just shows you how circumstances, fate, and what the people want in any given year, which is not always the same thing, really determines who they want to be their president.
Governor, you've given us a bit of an insight into the person Kamala Harris. What about the politician Kamala Harris? Some have described her, Donald Trump, as the most left-wing nominee the Democratic Party has ever had. Others say, oh, she's as centrist as Joe Biden. Others say, look, she's a shapeshifter. She has no core values or beliefs. How would you characterise Kamala Harris's politics and where she sits on that spectrum of moderate to progressive?
If you look at the whole package, you definitely put her in the mainstream. I mean, keep in mind, she didn't sign up to be a public defender. She signed up to be a prosecutor. And she put many people in prison. She busted trafficking gangs that engage in human trafficking. A lot of people selling fentanyl. She retrieved a lot of automatic weapons, took on gangs. You don't want to mess with her. On the other hand, no one can be nicer, sweeter, more empathetic to your family, to young people, to immigrants. She's what you want in a modern day president. And the option against Trump is so unpalatable, so unthinkable, that not only do we have someone who stands on their own should win going away, but the option is just unacceptable to most rational thinking people in California.
Governor, it's hard to know what people remember from conventions a few weeks later after the bounce fades. Is there any particular moment or any particular message that you feel sure is going to live on in people's minds through to the election?
You know, the entire convention had video interspersed of Kamla in various aspects of her life. And I think that was very impressive because it generated a range of emotions. I saw, people were crying at one point, very empathetic and sympathetic towards her at certain points. Saw the toughness in her when you need a president to be tough. But she really, I think, showed people she has done her homework as vice president. Keep in mind, this is the most prepared human being, not woman, human being in the Democratic Party. Prosecutor for 21 years, 8 of it Attorney General in California. A U.S. Senator for 4 years. A Vice President for 4 years, sitting in situation rooms, sitting in most meetings with the President, having private lunches with him every week, going on foreign trips with him and without him, meeting over 124 foreign leaders. She knows the world knows her. They know her as a good and decent person, but also as a strong tough-minded person that is looking out for the interests of every American.
Governor, we so appreciate you taking the time to talk to us. Thank you.
Thank you. God bless. Good to be with you.
So, as for the rest of the week in Chicago, Chaz, you indicated earlier that you thought that of all the dozens and dozens and dozens of speakers that we heard, past presidents, possibly future presidents, the Obamas really stood out to you. We saw a bit of Michelle Obama. I think, personally, she gets better and better.
Yeah.
Sometimes when she was on the stump during her husband's presidency, to me, she felt, I don't know, like a bit of a bad actor, over-emoting at times. Seems, whether it's more relaxed, less at stake perhaps, she's less concerned, but an astonishingly good speech from her, and not bad from the old man either.
Yeah, no, he did pretty well. I think the thing that's really good about Michelle Obama is that these days she doesn't even sound like she's making a speech.
No.
She sounds like she's having a conversation with the person on the other side of the camera.
Yep.
Which is really effective. Whereas even Barack Obama sounds like he's making a speech, a great speech, but it wouldn't be. I think that she's a more effective persuader because of that, because she seems very authentic the way she's just talking to you. There's real no nonsense about her.
I'm not a politician.
Yeah.
And I'm not in the pulpit either. Obama can be a politician. He can also be professorial, and he can also sort of, he's hearing the churchmen that he grew up listening to as well.
But I'll tell you what I love about both of them. Not only do they both say things perfectly and make and do a lot of things at once. They're really complicated. They make them seem easy and smooth and natural. But on top of that, both of them, I thought, showed remarkable selflessness as well, in that they had the audience just eating out of their hands, both of them. And both of them, as they got towards the end and they'd done their job, they both pulled out. And what I mean by that is there's the second last part of a speech, you start to well up to the big finale, and people go crazy.
You keep talking through the applause, you roll with it,
totally.
you roll with it.
And both of them did the same thing, which is they started the build, both of them.
Tap the brakes.
And then they both stopped.
Yeah.
And like Michelle Obama just stopped and said, now my job is to introduce Barack. And then Barack at the end, like he was building, and you could see people standing up, like giving a standing ovation, getting ready for the big moment that they knew was coming. But no, he just said, so get out there, tapped the podium and just walked off.
Yeah.
And the reason they did that was because it wasn't their convention.
Right.
Like they clearly were leaving room for Kamala Harris to shine, and to not make it all about them. And I thought that was just a subtle touch that I really liked about them. It was all they were using their remarkable talents in service of the greater cause.
Yes.
And I thought they did it very well.
Yeah, and I think not for nothing, they were programmed on night 2, not night 3. So Kamala Harris, I think, would have been fine anyway because she did meet the moment very effectively. But they're a heck of an act to follow, the two Obamas, and so probably a good idea that they put Tim Walz and Bill Clinton on night 3. But here's an example, I think, of Obama at ease, also enjoying getting back into the political fray somewhat with this attack on former President Donald Trump.
There's the childish nicknames, the crazy conspiracy theories, this weird obsession with crowd sizes.
Yeah, he does a nice line in mockery. Didn't quite go into deplorable territory,
No.
But it was certainly red meat to that audience.
That's as low road as Barack Obama gets, and it's still not really that low road.
Yeah.
I mean, the meaning is quite low road, but he does it in a special Obama way.
Yeah. So we also heard from obviously way back on the first night, Monday night in Chicago, Tuesday in Australia. We heard from current president, I almost called him former President Joe Biden. It feels like that. It feels like he's already former President Joe Biden. He's still got 5 months as the most powerful man on earth, and yet they paid respect to him, even though they allowed his speech to drift into the midnight hour by all the acts and all the speeches going over time.
It's still rated pretty well. Like it's not like people switched off their TVs.
And important to remember that the 4,000 or so Democratic delegates who were there this week, they were pledged delegates to Joe Biden. This was a Joe Biden crowd, and a lot of other people in that hall as well. But if there had been any animosity or residual frustration at the fact that Biden was very, very, very firmly ushered out the door. It was ultimately his decision, but he had, Nancy Pelosi's hand in the small of his back saying, Joe, it's up to you to decide what to do next. It was gracious of Biden to say, a lot of people are talking about the fact that I'm still mad about this. I'm not mad about this. That was kind of a bearing of the hatchet, I think.
That's the whole reason he was there. That's the function of his speech. His function of speech is to give the permission to the Biden fans who still exist that they're not betraying him by supporting Kamala Harris.
Yep.
And I think he's not a great speaker these days.
No.
He used to be a not bad speaker, but he's not now.
No. He shouts or he whispers. He's lost the middle gears.
But it didn't matter. His task was just to convince people that he meant it.
Yes.
That he doesn't bear grudges against Kamala Harris, and I believed him, and I think his supporters would as well. And just as a little aside, I think we shouldn't take that for granted.
No.
The fact that he doesn't, I think, bear any grudges against Kamala Harris. He seems to bear a grudge against Nancy Pelosi. He seems to bear a grudge against Barack Obama.
Yeah, maybe.
But not Kamala Harris. How many people would, in her position, would have no animosity between her and the president that she just surpassed?
Yep.
Like, she must have some pretty good people skills behind the scenes to smooth that over.
There's no doubt, from Biden's perspective, Harris was unwaveringly loyal right through her vice presidency, which is part of the reason why her approval ratings were so low, because she kept a low profile, took the tough jobs, voter rights and immigration, a bunch of things that were
I
not
think she
not
volunteered
winners.
them. She was given them.
But she took them. She took them.
Yeah.
And she could have said, I'm not going to do these things.
True.
She took them. So she was a loyal foot soldier, and it was rewarded with Biden's endorsement. But you mentioned an important phrase there, permission structure.
Yeah.
Not only did Biden give a permission structure to his supporters to now support Kamala Harris, but there were a number of very important speeches throughout that were Republicans, even former intimates of Donald Trump, who provided permission structures or attempted to provide permission structures for any Republicans who might be watching, both of them, that they can support Kamala Harris. Stephanie Grisham, former White House press secretary, chief of staff to former First Lady Melania Trump, she was quite revealing in basically, telling tales out of school, saying Trump refers to his supporters as losers in basements. Yeah. He has contempt for his own supporters.
And showing text messages.
Right.
Yeah, Melania.
But I think Adam Kinzinger we mentioned as well. That was important today. But I think possibly the most effective of all was Jeff Duncan, the former Lieutenant Governor of Georgia. He was Lieutenant Governor at the time of the Georgia recount and the runoff Senate elections. Like a number, to their eternal credit, of senior Republicans in that state, they did not bend to President Trump's will to steal the election. Jeff Duncan kind of had a message that was really not for the delegates, not for the people in Chicago, but for those one or two Republicans at home. See, have a look at what he had to say.
Let me be clear to my Republican friends at home watching. If you vote for Kamala Harris in 2024, you're not a Democrat, you're a patriot.
There's a USA chant.
Yeah.
The patriotism theme, yet again.
Patriotism, freedom, USA, USA, USA. The party of Trump that the Republican Party has now become has lost some of that in this sort of weird Trump amalgam of populism that is, as Adam Kinzinger said today, is no longer a conservative party. It is a populist, isolationist party. And the likes of Kinzinger and Duncan hope one day that the Republican Party comes back in the post-Trump era, if there is one. But then again, I'm sure Nelson Rockefeller and Gerald Ford wanted the Republican Party to come back in the era of Ronald Reagan, and it never did. It doesn't tend to work that way. But Jeff Duncan's message there, and the reappropriation of patriotism, freedom, the USA, USA chant, to say that, whereas Biden was talking about this is a fight for our democracy, the soul of the nation, they're now, by using these words like freedom, they're kind of saying the patriotic thing to do is to support the candidate who will support you and America, and that is not Donald Trump. He doesn't own the red, white and blue. He doesn't own patriotism.
On the freedom thing, there was a theme. I mean, the Obamas talked about freedom a lot, but also there was something, I think Buttigieg mentioned it, the idea of freedom to do something, as opposed to freedom from things, which is the more Republican framing of freedom.
Right.
They're trying to reframe it to be freedom to be safe, freedom to be able to marry whoever you want, the freedom to pray to whoever you want, etc.
So that is more the definition of freedom that existed up to and including the civil rights era, and the women's rights era, and the gay liberation movement. Freedom has, yes, it's now become something that involves firearms and not paying your taxes. So that's an important redefinition. What do you think of Bill Clinton this week? We see him every 4 years at the DNC. He's been turning up at these things since 1976, and when he was lieutenant governor of Arkansas, he was going to run for governor in 1978. He turns up at Jimmy Carter's convention and has been turning up ever since. He looks old.
Yeah, honestly, if I was one of the up-and-coming Democrats, I'd feel a little bit guilty about the fact that none of them are a patch on the Obamas or Clinton. Clinton was better than any of the young Turks that we saw over the last 2 days. He was great. I mean, as you say, he's getting old. His voice is leaving him.
Yeah.
As soon as he walked out, I think a lot of people's reaction would have been, wow, he's old.
Yeah.
But the old fox, he's still got it. He spends the first 5 lines talking about how old he is, and then says, "But I'm still younger than Donald Trump." Yeah. And I think that's one of 3 moments that people will remember. I think that would have shocked people. Why he is younger than Donald Trump?
Yeah.
But he is the only person who made the age thing stick in the entire 4 days, and he made it so effectively as a throwaway line.
Yeah.
Another example of Bill Clinton. Remember when I was talking about those themes? He hit one of those themes beautifully in such a memorable way. One of those themes, the theme of Kamala Harris does something, Trump only cares about himself. He doesn't do anything for you, he does it for himself. And Bill Clinton had just a classic Clintonism where he just came up with just the perfect way of remembering that Trump only cares about himself.
Kamala Harris is the only candidate in this race who has the vision, the experience, the temperament, the will, and yes, the sheer joy to get something done. I mean, look, what does her opponent do with his voice? He mostly talks about himself, right? So the next time you hear him, don't count the lies. Count the eyes.
The guy is brilliant. And he also, who can make stats memorable? Bill Clinton can. He had one more very memorable moment where he just pulled out a stat from nowhere. Look, it's slightly unfair, I feel, in that it's about jobs, and obviously Trump was disadvantaged a lot by COVID with jobs, just the timing of COVID with his jobs record.
Yes.
But basically the talking point was there have been 51 million jobs created since the end of the Cold War. The scoreboard is 50 million created by Democratic presidents, 1 million created by Republican presidents. Anyone who saw that is going to remember that forever.
Yeah.
And that is just the magic of Bill Clinton. He's just, look, he might be feeble, he might have lost the ability to speak, but the old dog's still got it up here.
Yeah, he is still the explainer-in-chief for all the problems we now recognise of Bill Clinton, and not just his behaviour as president, but his there's still a moment of truth to come, I think, with a lot of his personal history as well, that Democrats still tend to brush under the carpet for convenience sake. Bill Clinton was one of the warm-up acts for vice presidential nominee Tim Walz. An interesting choice as well, given that Tim Walz has some of that sort of, white working class, good old boy appeal that Clinton also has, an ability to talk to rural Americans. Bill Clinton is the last American president, really, to come from the rural part of America, to really be of the land. growing up on a farm in Arkansas. Tim Walz is the closest that we've had to that since then. Tim Walz, becoming increasingly sort of familiar with his talking points, some very moving moments where Coach Walz's old students and football team came up on the stage. But for my mind, better than anything that was said by Tim Walz, and he looks comfortable. He's risen to the occasion for sure. Was his young son Gus. Gus Walz, who we have learnt a bit about him in recent weeks. He has ADHD, he has some learning difficulties. His parents, Tim and his wife Gwen, both teachers or former teachers, have taken what seems to be a very progressive way in terms of raising him, helping to educate him, not trying to change him or, modify him in any ways, but just, letting Gus be Gus. And there was this beautiful moment where Gus was just sort of overwhelmed at seeing his dad up on that stage, and the pride that he felt was probably better than any other endorsement from a president or a former president when your own son is like this.
And I love you. I'm letting you in on how we started a family.
That was certainly moving, but for me, the kids moment, which I'm going to remember, is when, I'm not even sure if it was in the actual coverage of the convention. It might have been just in a viral clip when Tim Walz was being interviewed by one of the news stations and his kids were doing bunny ears behind him at the time. And he loved it. He tweeted it out himself. Yeah. He loved it. And you go, that's the kind of, that kind of stuff is gold for Tim Walz's reputation.
Right, well, that is the two conventions in the history books, done and dusted. Next will be the debate coming up in the next couple of weeks, which will be the next major set pieces. But let's have a look at where we are this week when it comes to the state of the race. Vice President Harris has extended her lead in the average of national polls this week. She is now 3.3 points ahead of former President Trump. And if you look at how these polls have tracked since the week that Biden dropped out just on a month ago, Harris overall has gained in excess of 2 percentage points, while Donald Trump is down just 0.3, so it hasn't changed that much for him. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. has lost half a point. So it's interesting to think where the support for Harris is coming from. Some polls at the moment suggest that she is picking up that other point and a bit from Cornel West, the Independent, Jill Stein, the Greens. They're now failing to register in a bunch of polls. They're getting asterisks and zeros. But when you're talking about such small numbers, it's hard for pollsters to figure out where they're coming from. There's also some evidence that those 1 in 3 American voters who are registered to vote but are unlikely to vote have now become enthusiastic and are now likely voters. So as Harris builds this small lead, it's going to be interesting to keep track of who is she building it with. Are they managing to get independents? Are they managing to get any disaffected anti-Trump Republicans? Who are they appealing to? And is it enough where they need to?
It's really hard to tell because at this stage of her honeymoon, and it's definitely a honeymoon, she's gaining votes and she's not losing any. Like there's no demographic where she's lost any at all. That's just not realistic. At some point in time, when things settle, she's going to lose some demographics. When that happens, then we'll have a better idea, I think, of where she's succeeding and when she's not.
We've had already, we've gotten whiplash from the number of potential game-changing events in this campaign, including the assassination attempt against former President Trump, Joe Biden's decision to drop out of the race. There's now another one which may not have a significant impact, but it could. Robert Kennedy Jr. is now reportedly getting ready to potentially drop out of the presidential race altogether. Some say he's definitely dropping out. By the time you see this show, he may have already dropped out. There are also some reports that suggest that Kennedy, after shopping around to try and get a job with Kamala Harris in a potential Harris administration, has now gone back to Donald Trump and said, well, I haven't got a better offer anywhere else. So if you want me to endorse you, Donald Trump, then, how about being Health and Human Services Secretary and we'll ban vaccines together? How would that be?
Yeah, well, look, there's no doubt about this. There's no rumours about this. Kennedy has very, very clearly stated that he wanted to speak to Kamala Harris about working with her on her administration. He went for a job and she ignored him.
Yeah.
And then he threw a tanty and he gave this very long tweet about how awful the Kamala Harris campaign is, the campaign that only days earlier he had sought a job with. And then he has his vice presidential the nominee, Nicole Shanahan, she goes on a podcast of some kind.
Yeah, bit of a hippy-dippy California podcast.
Yeah, and she is very open about the fact that they have two choices. One is they can build the party, and if they build the party, only take 5% of the vote, which they're currently above. If they only get 5% of the vote, then they'll get $13 million to build the 2028 campaign with, and they'll be able to get on the ballot much more easily next time around, and they can genuinely build a real third party. Now, I don't think they can, but she's selling that they can, at the very least. That's one option.
Yeah.
Or the other option is they can work with Donald Trump. And when they say work with Donald Trump, they mean RFK takes a job in the administration. And look, I'm not an RFK supporter, but I've heard from plenty of them online over the last few months, and I feel sorry for them. If I was one of them, I would be really pissed off.
If you've donated money to get onto all these ballots, and now they're saying in August or September, oh yeah, you know what? Bobby's going to take a job with Trump, and Nicole's going to run for governor of California in a year or two. You'd think that you'd done your dough.
I would feel like I've been sold out. And the reason why I say that is, yes, he can argue I have more influence as being part of an administration rather than just being part of nothing. But the whole reason they're supporting him, his entire reason for existing is to provide another option. And here they are saying, well, there's a path where we can build that option, and we won't take it because RFK wants a job. And I just think that's just a complete betrayal of what they've been saying for the last 6 months.
So earlier in the year, Kennedy was getting up to 15, even close to 20% in some polls against Biden and Trump. He's now down around 5%, and there's some evidence to suggest that more of that 5% is coming from possible Trump supporters than possible Harris supporters. So does that 5% now just go straight on to Trump's poll numbers when Kennedy pulls out?
Well, no poll goes from head-to-head polls to polls with RFK and suddenly Kamala Harris is 5 points higher up. Like, she's doing better. And like, RFK is definitely a siphon for votes from Trump, but it's not 100% a siphon for votes from Trump. Like, he's probably, I'd say that this probably is going to lead to Trump getting an extra point or two on Kamala Harris that he otherwise would have had. I don't think that's going to make the difference in the election, but it all helps. So, I mean, this might make the difference. I certainly think Trump is better off because of this. I think this is definitely a victory for Trump.
Yeah, although if you were a Trump supporter who then thought, oh, I might try Bobby Kennedy, do you go back to Trump or do you go to the sofa and stay home, not vote altogether? I suspect it could be a bit of a wash, but we will see in the next 10 and a half weeks. That is it for another Fireside Chat. We will see you next Wednesday night for Planet America, 9:30 p.m. on ABC TV, and anytime from 9 p.m. if you want to watch us on iView, YouTube or Facebook.
Don't forget to pat. A brand new Planet Extra podcast is on the way right there.
See you later.